This episode brought to you by
GTM AI Academy. Learn AI from a globally trusted resource. Coach K, Jonathan Carfort. Their bundle, Enablement AI Mastery, includes both the core Generative AI Foundations course and Enablement AI Mastery specifically. Each course has a value of $599 individually, but Coach K is offering them as a bundle with reduced pricing. And as a listener of the Inside Sales Enablement podcast, if you act now, you can use code ISE30 to get an additional 30% off of the entire thing. You will also receive free access to the GTM AI Tools demo library. Coach K has done the demos, so you don't have to, and offers his straight shooting opinion, fact-based through an enablement lens. Go to www.gtmaiacademy.com and enter code ISE30 today and elevate your AI enablement game.
Welcome to the Inside Sales Enablement podcast. Where has the profession been? Where is it now? And where is it heading? What does it mean to you, your company, other functions, the market? Find out here. Join the founding father of the sales enablement profession, Scott Santucci, and Trailblazer Brian Lambert as they take you behind the scenes of the birth of an industry. The Inside Sales Enablement podcast starts now.
I'm Scott Santucci.
I'm Brian Lambert, and we are the Sales Enablement Insiders. Our podcast is for sales enablement leaders looking to elevate their function, expand their sphere of influence, and increase the span of control within their companies.
Together, Brian and I have worked on over 100 different kinds of sales enablement initiatives as analysts, consultants, or practitioners. We've learned the hard way what works and, maybe more importantly, what doesn't.
That's right, Scott. And today on this show, what we're going to discuss, everybody, is who is the customer of sales enablement? That's right. It's a kind of a Zen question, but who is our customer? And as usual, we're going to start with a centering story to give our episode a theme. So, Scott, what do you have for us?
Well, I feel like I'm going in the way, way, way forward machine here with a story that starts in 1958, not 1858. If you've been listening to our show. In 1958, the executives at Ford got pretty much religion on this new thing about market research. So if you've been following, maybe you watched Mad Men and you realized that the advertising industry was really starting to evolve in the late 50s and early 60s, and that's actually a true thing. And they started doing market research, and the executives at Ford got this great idea. What if we did market research to design a car? Makes sense, right? So they surveyed lots of users, or users, that's a modern term, lots of customers about what they'd want to see in a car. And they designed this car based on this feedback of all these people. And they were going to get massive market share because they made sure that they got every type of person involved, from older people, people with families, single people, people who wanted heft, people who wanted a family environment. They took all that information and they designed a car for everybody. And they rolled it out expecting they were just going to clean house and dominate market share. You know what the name of that product was?
Was it the Edsel?
It was the Edsel.
Yeah.
And the Edsel,
Colossal
by 1960, they pulled it from the shelf. So it was just a 2-year life cycle, which is not a long time for any kind of car. And they invested so much money that in 1960, they reported a loss of $250 million on that initiative. $250 million. That's a lot of money, isn't it, Brian?
Well, I'm sure in 1960 it was.
Well, isn't it a lot of money for today? I mean, losing $250 million, no one's going to want to write that on a statement.
That's true. I'll give you that.
Let's put it in the frame. Let's frame it out, though. If that were today, the scope of that failure would have been $2.2 billion.
Oh,
Think
wow.
about the headlines that would have on MSNBC or what we'd be hearing about the huge catastrophic failure that Ford did.
Hmm. Well, gee,
That's our story.
That's interesting because they did the research and they probably saw the huge market opportunity, built the car that hit all the customer feedback and had a colossal failure. So that's interesting. And what do you think? Why that story with regard to who is our customer?
Yeah. So what, right? What does it have to do with anything? The reason it has anything to do with why we're talking about it and the theme for today, sales enablement, who is your customer, is because when the Ford executives designed the Edsel for everybody, they actually made it for nobody. And that's really what we're finding a lot of people, there's a bunch of definitions about what sales enablement is or isn't. There's a lot of terminology that people keep debating and wanting to share. At the end of the day, if you're not really clear on who your customers are and to whom you're servicing, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah. So let me pop quiz our nation, Insider Nation. Pop quiz. I'll give you 3 seconds to answer this question. Who's the customer of sales enablement? Just answer that question. Who is the customer of sales enablement? And I'm willing to guess if you're like most people, you're probably saying sales, or you're running down a huge list of people that you talk to or work with. So, Scott, what do you think? Is that the right way to think about it? Is the first group that comes to the mind, or the people you're working with on a day-to-day basis?
Right. So the function's called sales enablement. Of course, sales is our customer, right? Well,
That's right.
I would beg to differ. Your customer is the person who gives you money. Period.
All right, hang on a second. So a customer in business is somebody who definitely gives you money. I'll give you that. Take your wallet out, buy your ice cream, you're a customer of that ice cream place. In this case, in sales enablement, you're saying the same thing literally. That's not an analog. That's a literal statement.
It's a literal statement. Your customer is the person who's the department or whoever is who's funding your department or funding you. If you're a one-man show, if you're a one-man band, your customer is whoever is paying your check. Who you serve may be salespeople, but a salesperson isn't going to write you a check. They're not your customer. Your customer is the person who's giving you the check. So you have 2 variables here. You have what your customer wants, and then you have the way that you're going to give them what they want. You service the sales force. So right there, you might be at odds with different people, and it's important to think of that way. My customer is the person who's giving me the money. Who I serve is people in the sales force.
Yeah. So this is good. So let's kind of pull this out, right? So you've got 2 buckets, and let's just say the whole entire group is people, and we broke the people into 2 groups. One is our customer, and that's who gives us the money. And I think that would be good to understand that, because sometimes that money is centralized and you're just given a budget. So we're probably let's make sure we talk about how do we know who that customer is, and then the second bucket, I'll just call them stakeholders. So you have stakeholders and customers, and the stakeholder bucket is the folks that we work with: marketing, product, sales people are stakeholders, even the impacted groups. And I think there's a lot of impacted groups that puts us in sales enablement between a rock and a hard place. Basically, you have all these competing inputs, different priorities, different asks from both groups, stakeholders and customers. And I can see where you're going with this, because if you lose sight of who's in what bucket, you may take different types of action. And then sometimes, and I've seen this in the folks that I've talked to, sometimes the squeaky wheel gets the most service because they're the loudest. And is that really who you want to be serving? Is the person who's got the loudest opinion of what you
Well,
should
also,
be doing.
does that put you in a spot of where you add the most value?
That's right. That's right. So what do you think about that? The customer bucket, stakeholder bucket.
Yeah, let's go.
let's-
Let's go through some scenarios. There are, I think we identified 3 or 4 classic places where a sales enablement department can report into.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And let's talk through, like, if you report into that, who you report into is your customer.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. So what about let's say marketing? If you report into marketing, that senior VP, CMO is your customer, then who would be the people we serve or the stakeholders that we're working with?
Right. So if you are reporting to the CMO and you're the head of sales enablement, why do you report there? What is it that he or she wants? He or she wants to be able to improve how the company is delivering messages through the sales channel to be able to be differentiated. So who do you serve? You serve, one, the people who have messaging inside the marketing department to make it more sales accessible. That's one person you serve. You may even serve the product people to make it more translatable. You might be serving product launches and how to get the word out to sales. You also are servicing salespeople, since your remit in that area probably won't include training. So you are servicing information about your products and services and about differentiation. So you are servicing salespeople by helping them with the information required for a launch, or the information to differentiate, or some messaging. That's who you're servicing and how you're servicing them.
So if I'm a sales leader and I come to you and you're reporting into marketing, I say, hey, you should really take over that sales kickoff. You're better at it. What would be your answer?
Well, I would say, are you going to give us funding for that?
Right, because it's out of your scope right now.
It's that is not a service that my customer is offering. That's outside of the marketing span of control. So I'd say, let's go talk to our boss. So I would go talk to my boss, the CMO, and I'd say, look, this is a great opportunity. It's a great platform for us to provide a foundation to deliver lots of messages. We should do this. And they would say, that makes a lot of sense. That's great, because it's part of your mission. You're right. It does give us a better platform. We should do it. Then we negotiate and say, what do we want for it in exchange? So what are you going to give us? Are you going to give us the budget for it? Because we're not going to pay for the whole budget for it. You already have a budget for sales kickoffs. So let's use your budget. Let's use your resources.
Right. So send us the money plus 2 people or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And we'll happily do it.
Okay, so let's go to the next one.
Yep.
Let's see, sales ops. So if I'm reporting into ops, I'm a sales leader, a sales enablement leader reporting to ops, and I'm probably working on the kickoff or sales process work, maybe even forecasting, pipeline reporting, stuff like that.
Okay, so these are, again, each of these scenarios, by the way, a disclaimer, each of these scenarios are going to be different. We need to make sure you're clear on what it is that each one of your customers want. But let's say in a classic VP of or head of sales operations, if you're reporting there, they're probably looking at a bunch of functional capabilities that they need to possess. So for example, it is very common that a sales operations group is going to look at the functionality of the sales force and what the capabilities are, whether we have the right skills and the right talent to be able to execute the sales model. Okay, so what they'll say is, we need a talent pillar or talent component of that. We'll call that sales enablement. And I expect you, as the sales, they probably won't say this. They'll just describe, what we're looking for. But this is what your job is to do, is to make sure it's clear what's expected of you. Like, what is the service? What does the customer want? But really, what they're looking for is probably adoption of the sales methodology that they've worked on with the VP of Sales. So, who am I servicing? I am servicing the sales managers and the sales leadership on first educating them on that sales methodology, how it works, how they can make it work, and then providing training for that. I might also own very specific tasks like new hire training, but maybe even managing kickoffs. We talked about the sales kickoff before. I might manage those. So I could. I am servicing the sales force through that lens.
Yeah, and all of that is to be determined. Discussions would happen. Then obviously that would get documented in the charter and socialized so everybody understands, one, who your customer is of sales enablement, and then two, who you're servicing and who you're working with, and the stakeholders impacted, including dependencies, I would say. Like, what are you dependent upon? What do you need from people to pull off your services? And what's that working relationship?
And let me reiterate why this is so important. Why it's so important is because, let's take the sales kickoff, for example. If you are in this role and you're reporting to sales operations, you're going to feel obligated to make sure that all of the content, all of the kickoff stuff is all organized, all well done, etc. So you're going to take on a lot more extra work. If you say, my job is managing the kickoffs, and you can delineate roles and responsibilities and say, hey, marketing, you need to get us this material a week before, and it needs to be in this format. And we're going to role play how we present it. Then you spend less work and you're putting the work onto the people who are plugging into it. Obviously, you can't say that to your CEO who's going to show up at the last moment, with their content. But that's how you manage that, by saying, this is what my remit is, and this is what my focus is. And my focus is on the head of sales operations. And I
because
know
they're my primary customer.
They are my customer, period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now you have to be conscious about who their customers are, right? Those are their secondary, so you know how your service is fitting into an overall plan. But especially if you talk to stakeholders that are outside of your, daily remit, they're going to want to know how it all fits together. So you should be aware of it. But it's just this intentionality and focus is really important in terms of establishing roles and responsibilities, and more importantly, your workload, the quality of work that you provide, and the resources that you get.
Mm-hmm. So where does the VP of sales fit in these scenarios? If you're working under marketing and ops, and those are your customers, what's the role of the VP of sales then, and the sales leadership?
Well, the VP of in terms of the CMO is the one who should have the relationship with the VP of sales. I might be an account. We might work it out to where I play the account manager role, a liaison. But I should always have meetings with both of those together, always, and sort of facilitate. It is not my responsibility to build the relationship there. It's my responsibility to help the VP of sales, VP of marketing have a better relationship there. My job is to make my customer a hero. If the VP of marketing is going to engage with the sales leaders, then that's what needs to be done. If he or she doesn't want to work with the sales leaders, we need to make that clear. It's our job to make sure that our customer is successful. So that means we might say, well, you need to participate. Let me get you prepared. Let me give you, some of that feedback. You don't want to be in unnatural spots. Same thing with the head of sales operations. Here's the feedback that I'm going to give you. Let's rehearse beforehand what our messaging is. How are we going to tackle it? What's my role? What's your role?
Yeah. So that VP of sales is then what? Is that the beneficiary of the work that you're doing as a stakeholder? If they're not a customer, because if you're the CMO is the customer, is the VP of sales your the beneficiary or the?
Well, they are. I am in service of, right? So the value that the VP of Sales gets from new hire training, that's the benefit that he gets out of it, and everybody in their organization gets the benefit of the new hire training that I'm doing. Say, and if I'm reporting to the head of sales ops. Sales ops, the customer is likely the VP of Sales. So they got a different situation to sort out. So I am responsible for providing capabilities that my boss, the VP of Operations, provides back.
Gotcha.
It's important you know that, so you don't start thinking that you're like the king of everything, and then you get out of alignment with your boss. It's not good.
Right. So
I thought we had another scenario where what's the situation if the VP of Sales is?
Yeah, let's do that. So we did marketing, we did ops. What if he reported into the VP of Sales?
So if I report into the VP of Sales, what is it that he or she's looking for? They're looking for anything that's going to help them make their number. So under that expanse, there might be, what I would do is I would do a baseline analysis and understand all of the different variables. I wouldn't just launch into training. I would say, Mr. VP of Sales, I know you have some ideas of what we want to accomplish. We'll tackle some of those short-term goals. But we know that we want to have a strategy moving forward. Maybe we have too many reps, and that's actually causing us problems. Maybe our biggest problem is in sales quotes, and that's the primary area to fix. Maybe our primary challenge is in the lack of differentiated messaging. We can't just keep assuming that it's sales training. Let's find out where the low-hanging fruit is. And then I would do an assessment, because anything that I can do to help him or her meet the overall number and show what it takes, and to pull down short-term wins and constantly progressive wins, because they've got a very limited window to produce results, they're going to be open for.
Yeah, I like that.
So who do I serve? I serve the sales force as a whole. I serve the sales leadership one way. I serve the managers another way. I serve the salespeople another way.
Yeah.
And
if you have different regions, you would serve the different regions differently as well.
Yeah. These distinctions are really important because we all want to get the attaboys, and we want to be the heroes for the salespeople in the trenches. But if that's not part of our remit, then we're always going to be in constant conflict. Our boss is going to say, well, I'm not really looking for you to be the champion of the salespeople, like the Lorax of the salespeople. That's not really what I hired you for. What I hired you for is to help us meet our number.
That's right. And I have the accountability of the budget to my customer, the CEO, and this is what I've signed us up for. What are you doing?
Exactly. And we could debate till we're blue in the face about, well, here's how sales training helps, and here's how this helps.
And this person in the hallway, and this is an email I got, and they really need that help.
Yeah. And that might be true, but if you can't make the overall, it might not be the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. And you need to be really careful about what it is that you're doing, really intentional of what you're doing, and make sure it is valuable to the customer that you're serving.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and I like that because that's critical, and obviously, and we're in a value-based business, and we're talking about the service we're providing. We have stakeholders and customers, right? And quantifying the impact is definitely part of this discussion, and we'll talk about that, some more in future podcasts. But let's talk about then, how do we figure out what's going to be the most valuable approach? Like what is value here? What does it mean to be valuable? And I think we have to figure out what these goals and challenges are, what problems we're trying to solve, and really focus in on the customer and the audience of those that we're serving, the stakeholder groups. And, the key is to ask them what's working. And you and I have talked through the last couple of weeks about, what works and what doesn't. this idea of what works is an interesting discussion point, because I think there's so much out on LinkedIn, and there's so many things coming in my inbox on what doesn't work, and feedback that we get all the time on what's broken or what should we be doing differently, or you have a typo on your website or whatever. These are easy items for folks to point out. But I find, and you and I have talked about this, it's really hard to get people to talk about what works.
Yeah, it is. And let's frame this out in a situation. Let's say here's the scenario, right? The scenario is you have just built a new sales process. Okay, so this is not uncommon. Actually, it's very, very, very common. With all the sales transformations that are coming into bear, companies are investing in a sales process, which is, hey, these are the steps that we know that we're going to do in order for how we change the way that we introduce information and our capabilities to our customers. Okay, so let's define that as a sales process. A methodology of how to do a sales process or how to sell is as a methodology. But let's say we've rolled out a new sales process, right? We're going to go through this sequence of events. We're going to include these people, blah, 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 blah. So what's the service that we provide? We work for the VP of, in this case, I'm going to do something discrete. We work for the head of sales operations. What service do we provide?
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, because is it reporting services? Is it adoption services? Is it training?
An adoption of what specifically? Right. So let's say that it's the adoption of the sales process. Can we get our sellers to follow the sales process?
Right.
That is our primary mission.
Right.
So we need to figure out then, how would we go about doing it?
Yeah, that's good. Because that's a broader view then, which is why I like the stakeholder language, because if that is the primary goal and the charge provided by our customer, and we want to drive that outcome, we have to think outside our silo, pull that off.
Right. So the first thing is, I'm going to assume that the sales methodology has been designed. So the first thing is we need to introduce it to the sales force. We might call it training. I would advise us to call it introduction. The reason that I say that is if our remit is we want it to be adoption, we need to not. What happens if you say training? People assume you have that one event, that one time, that week or that day or whatever time you've been given to cram as much information as possible to make sure that they follow that sales process. And are you going to bet there's 365 days in the year, and you take 5 days out to train on the sales process, 360 days other? Are you going to bet that that's going to be adopted because you roll out a training class? I wouldn't bet on that. So I'd say step number one is we're going to make people aware of this new sales process, and we're going to do it through some introductory courses. Step number two is we're going to spotlight people who are really using it. Find the 20% of the people who are really using it. So that's where we go to what works. Who are the people really religious about this process? And let's get them talking. Step three, we'll keep asking them more details about specific steps of the sales process that they like. And we're going to create a sales podcast or a sales rap session where I invite people to hear, hey, here's specifically how that sales process works to help me get meetings with CIOs or CFOs or whomever the C-level target is. And then just have that as a topic, because this is what works. And then people will model what works. Then the next thing that you do is say, hey, how do you handle this objection? They've agreed to explore further, and then they say, well, how do you help? So we have a podcast just on where people who found examples of what works to answer that question. And we keep that focus on what works, and guess what you're going to find at the end of the year? You're going to find a lot of adoption. It works.
That's right.
So the challenge then is focusing on what works, and coming up with the language for it is important. And I think that really goes to how we frame Our job is to drive adoption of the sales process. And
Right.
we have many tactics available to us, and these are the ways that we're able to do it.
Yeah, and that's good. And for a lot of reasons, and one of that really pops to mind here is if you take that approach, or when you take that approach, it gets you out of the, this is the way it's always been done muscle memory. Oh, we're rolling out a sales methodology, so let's do the standard, do our training, put it on the team site, send the email, just like everything else.
And then complain that salespeople aren't doing it.
Right. But if you're like, okay, what's the outcome here? We're going to call it adoption. What do we mean by adoption? And these questions might be, out of the norm, but it shouldn't take, more than a couple hours to define the design point for these things.
Yes, I think you're right. I think we need to be thoughtful because we're trying to provide value and we're trying to provide an enabling capability. The capability that we're enabling in this case is the sales process, if that's our assignment. So we got to stay focused on that because the company has invested time, energy, and resource on it.
Right.
If people are adopting the sales process and results stink, then you can say there's something wrong with the sales process, but not the adoption program. If,
Right.
however, only 20% of the salespeople are following the sales process, guess what? It's going to be perceived that you haven't done your job.
Mm-hmm.
So those are very clear things. Then the next question that you're going to ask is, it's pretty easy to measure the perceived success of a training program. You can say, I had this people go through the course. They rated the course, pretty well. Boom. That's how we're going to evaluate performance. But that's a metric of number, quantity, how many butts and seats. And then the other metric is a metric of the people who are taking the course. So that's going to motivate you to make it as easy and likable and lightweight as possible. But there's no correlation to whether or not they're actually using the sales methodology or not, the sales process or not. And that's what your assignment is. Your assignment is to drive adoption of the sales methodology, not be popular.
Right.
So you need to say, here's how we will measure adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And here's why the sales managers are important to that. Then you can say, here's my sales manager program.
Right. And I think, the rub on this that we need to be prepared for is, let's say somebody spent 3 months on the methodology or even longer, and then they're like, okay, we're done, so let's start training next week. And if you are the, person or function responsible for adoption, you've got to push back on that. You've got to learn how to have that conversation that says, look, I know you guys are done with it. I should have probably been involved in the whole entire process here, but from an adoption perspective, we can't start next week. And here's why. And here's the adoption program, and you got to have that conversation. And you got to interrupt that inertia. Hopefully you've got the relationships where you've been involved in the whole time. You've spent 3 months on the adoption plan while they've spent 3 months on, the build, and you've given input into that,
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's a reality of, hey, we've got the initiative here, time to roll it out, go. And that you don't want to be in that spot.
Right.
So let's talk about how we don't get in that spot. Let's talk about, some underlying themes here. I've taken some notes and let me give you specific takeaways. First, I would say you've got to understand the purpose of your department, and you must be extremely clear on that purpose. And that includes the customer and those whom you serve. That's the first point. The second point here in all of this is your role must be clearly defined in order to establish and manage expectations. And that's in 2 buckets that we talked about: the role of your customer and the role of the people you serve. And those people you serve we called stakeholders, and that ties back actually to our stakeholder management series and the Chicken Hawk episode. And then the third thing I would say is you've got to define your services in a way that's tangible and clear. The services that you're providing on the behalf of your customer, what you're funded to do, and then also the impact of those services to the roles you serve. So Scott, that's my three things is, the purpose of your department, your role must be clear, and then you've got to define your services. What do you think of those three?
I love it. I think that let's add some color to this. So a lot of people say, hey, I really don't need to do that because it's clear what's expected of me because it's in my job description. That's not true. Your department is different than your job description. So the reason that you need to be really, really clear is that the more you understand what is it that you are looking to accomplish, and you can't just ask, I need more clarity, I need to know. You need to be thoughtful about it and say, okay, the thing that I'm doing is this, the goal is that, so why is it that I'm doing this? What is the mission? What is the primary purpose? And then that's who your customer is. You want to make sure it's clear so that you don't get micromanaged, you don't give a lot of tasks involved. You say, these are the programs that we're going to do. The second thing is be really, really, really clear to whom you serve. Those are steps that your boss isn't going to think through. And the more you can say, look, we have this department here, this is how we activate that group, or look, we have different salespeople, different types of salespeople. Do all of them need the sales methodology training or the sales process training, the example we were using before? He's like, what do you mean? Of course they do. So BDRs need that. Maybe we need to modify it for the strategic accounts versus the new business people. Oh yeah, you're right. Good point. Good point. And then you could say, we can roll it out right now for the new business people. And then we're going to do a staged rollout to the strategic accounts people. And then we're going to do a modified version to the BDRs. And then you can say, here's sort of our release schedule, and here's what it looks like. Then you are very clear that the value that you're providing is targeted to each of those roles. So then back to your roles. It's really important. Your role isn't just your job description. Your job description is there for the most part as, hey, these are the ways that we're going to manage your MBOs and what's important. But you should be able to influence those over time, each quarter, if you have quarterly business reviews and the like. So the more you understand what the purpose of your department is, the more you're going to be able to manage your roles, and then the more you're going to be able to clearly articulate the roles of your people, and then the roles of your customers, so you know what levers to pull. And that's why stakeholder management is so critically important. It's really making sure everybody's getting what they want, which is what the theme of the chicken hawk episode is. And then lastly, you need to define the things that you're doing in terms of services, not tasks. The task is going to invite, lots of detailed inspection. And then maybe you have done a lot of tasks. I've seen many, many, many sales enablement leaders get a lot of great feedback on training programs that they've rolled out and end up getting replaced because the sales force as a whole isn't adopting the sales methodology or the sales process. Who gets blamed for that? The sales enablement leader. So think about that in terms of services, which training is a component of, but you might have adoption programs, you might have real lightweight things that you can do, like a sales rep form where people can call in. It also includes providing videos. It also includes sales coaching. All of those things are under an umbrella of a service.
Oh yeah, love it. And I think, for our listeners, go back, replay that, and you've got a bit of a checklist there. So Scott, that's really good. And I know we're running out of time. So actually, I want to just recap those three, and then let's take us out. First, make sure you have the purpose of your department very clear. Second, your role has to be clear so that you can manage expectations. And third, define the services that you're providing. And with that, everybody, I appreciate your time. As always, listen to us on InsideSE.com. Send us a note. Drop us a line. We'd love to hear your feedback. Also, continue to provide topics and volunteer. We'd like to get more listeners on the show. So thanks so much on behalf of Scott. Thanks so much for your time, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care, everybody.
Thanks for joining us. To become an insider and amplify your journey, make sure you've subscribed to our show. If you have an idea for what Scott and Brian can cover in a future podcast or have a story to share, please email them at engage@insidese.com. You can also connect with them online by going to insidese.com, following them on Twitter, or sending them a LinkedIn request.